Have you ever wondered what's actually inside the chicken broth you pour without a second thought? You use it to stretch a soup, soften vegetables, warm up leftovers, or build a quick pot of rice. It feels safe, almost comforting, like the one ingredient that could never betray you. But what if the broth you trust is quietly doing the opposite? Some cartons carry sodium loads that hit your body harder than the meal itself. Some rely on flavor enhancers to fake richness instead of simmering real bones. And a few have had packaging problems serious enough to trigger official recalls. None of that shows on the front label. The golden color looks right. The words feel warm. The promise seems familiar. But comfort shouldn't hide shortcuts. So before you reach for that next can or carton, let's take a closer look at which broths lift your cooking, and which ones deserve to disappear from your kitchen for good. Number 1. College Inn Chicken Broth. Most people keep a can of College Inn somewhere in the back of the pantry. It feels dependable, almost automatic, the kind of broth you reach for when you want something warm without much work. But the moment you stop and read the label, that comfort starts to look different. Meanwhile, the facts are right there in print: roughly 1,460 milligrams of sodium in a single can, plus sugar and yeast extract folded into the mix. On the surface, none of that stands out when the can is cold. The broth looks pale gold, the scent hits you fast, and the promise seems familiar. Yet when checked closely, it becomes clear that the flavor doesn't come from slow-simmered bones. It comes from enhancers designed to imitate depth. Sugar softens the edges. Yeast extract widens the flavor. Salt carries everything on its back. And the broth that should taste round and steady ends up leaning on additives to feel complete. The difference shows up in the pot. You pour it in expecting it to bloom. Instead, the first sip feels sharp. 2 bites later, the flavor already starts fading. By the time you reach the bottom of the bowl, the only thing left is a dry mouth and the urge to drink water. It's not that the broth is unsafe, it's that the experience leaves you more drained than comforted. In practical cooking, the problem grows. A chicken noodle pot that should taste fuller the longer it simmers somehow becomes thinner. Fresh vegetables lose their sweetness. Even the chicken you shred by hand tastes flatter than it should. Salt keeps rising while the broth itself keeps falling away, leaving everything trapped in a narrow one-note lane. A stock that should carry the dish ends up asking the dish to carry it instead. This isn't about turning against convenience. Convenience has its place, but real broth, even in a box, should act like a foundation, something that steadies the meal rather than overwhelms it. Here the balance slips. You're not getting the slow extraction that builds body or the gentle richness that makes a soup stick with you. You're getting liquid that behaves like seasoning, not broth. And the more you cook with it, the more the trade-off shows. You can taste the difference most in simple dishes. A basic chicken and rice bowl ends up tasting strangely hollow, no matter how much you season afterward. A pot of noodles feels metallic around the edges. Even a quick gravy comes off too salty, but somehow still weak. Everything relies on correction: more herbs, more aromatics, more time, all because the broth never showed up with its share of the work. For many people, College Inn was the broth they grew up seeing in the cupboard. That familiarity makes it easy to trust. But when the label tells a different story, it's worth pausing. Sodium that climbs past daily limits in one serving. Sugar where it doesn't belong. Yeast extract trying to pretend it was simmered with real bones. None of that helps your cooking. None of it makes the meal richer or steadier. Comfort food should feel earned. It should taste like something built, not something pushed. And while this broth may look the part, the experience it delivers leans more on force than flavor. Number 2. Great Value Chicken Broth. If College Inn left you worried about salt and shortcuts, Great Value takes that concern in a different direction. This one doesn't just lean on enhancers, it carries a record that should make any home cook pause. Start with the facts. One recent FDA recall was issued because the packaging on certain Great Value family-size broths failed. When the seal weakens, bacteria can slip in and the carton can soften or bulge. Add to that several versions built with MSG dextrose, autolyzed yeast, and artificial flavor boosters. It's a long list for something that should be little more than chicken, water, vegetables, and time. More importantly, long-term exposure to these additives has real consequences. High sodium and chemical flavor enhancers force the body to pull water into the bloodstream to keep balance. Over months and years, that means higher blood pressure, more strain on the kidneys, and a digestion chain that works harder than the meal is worth. Clinically speaking, it's not the single bowl that matters, it's the accumulation. As doctors note, when the base of your food is built on additives instead of nutrients, your body pays for it quietly over time, says Dr. Michael Greger, who often explains how everyday processed ingredients can erode health without making a scene. In the body's reality, this shows up as bloating, slower recovery after meals, and a sense of heaviness that doesn't match what you ate. Even simple dishes like a chicken and rice bowl can leave you oddly thirsty or lightheaded afterward. And when that pattern repeats week after week, your system begins adjusting to a salt load it was never meant to carry. Now compare that with pure chicken broth, the kind made from real bones, steady heat, and natural electrolytes. Real broth supports hydration instead of challenging it. Its sodium is present but balanced. Its proteins and minerals help you feel grounded rather than swollen. It builds flavor from extraction, not chemistry, and your body responds differently. Steadier circulation, calmer digestion, fewer spikes and drops after a meal. The broth works with you, not against you. That's where the contrast lands hardest. Great value offers convenience, but the trade-off hits your body long before it hits your taste buds. What feels like a simple shortcut adds up quietly pressure on the kidneys, tension in the bloodstream, and fatigue. You never connect back to the broth you trusted. For many families, the draw is the price, and price matters, but the cost hidden inside the carton matters more. Food doesn't have to be expensive, to be honest. It only has to avoid cutting corners that force your body to carry the burden. Here's the simple message: if broth is something you use often, choose one that leaves your body calmer, not more strained. Read the label, look for steady ingredients, and don't let a low sticker price outweigh what you feel long after the meal is done. Your broth should nourish you, not make your body work overtime. Number 3. Tabachnik Classic Wholesome Chicken Broth. If a broth calls itself wholesome, shouldn't tabachnik be the one that earns that title? That's the expectation the carton creates the moment you look at it. Calm colors, soft claims, and a liquid that looks almost cleaner than water. It gives off the feeling of something gentle, something safe, something light enough for anyone who wants a break from heavy flavors. But once you turn the carton around, that softness fades quick. Tabachnik loads every cup with roughly 900 milligrams of sodium and provides 0 grams of protein. Not low protein, 0. That means no collagen, no richness, no extraction, no foundation. A broth with no protein is a broth that never actually met chicken bones in a meaningful way. And when you open the carton and the first thing that rises is a bright salt aroma, not chicken, not vegetables, the label suddenly becomes more honest than the branding. Once you look at how this broth is built, the logic behind those numbers becomes clearer. A stock with no protein means the extraction process is minimal. That usually means fewer bones, shorter simmer cycles, or a production line that treats broth like flavored water. In systems like that, salt becomes the structure. It's not there to enhance real depth, it's there to create the illusion of it. Sodium gives the tongue a quick signal something is happening. Something is savory even when nothing else is carrying the weight. And there's a reason tabachnik leans so heavily on it. In large-scale production, consistent bone quality is expensive. Long simmering times slow down output. Real extraction costs more and fluctuates from batch to batch. But sodium is cheap. Sodium is stable. Sodium tastes the same every time. It smooths over inconsistencies, hides weak inputs, and keeps the flavor identical no matter what came through the supply chain that week. From a production standpoint, it's efficient. From a nutritional standpoint, it's empty. That leaves marketing to bridge the gap, and tabachnik does it well. Wholesome, classic, small batch. Those words are chosen carefully. They appeal to the buyer who wants something lighter, something gentler, something that sounds closer to homemade without the work of homemade. And the crystal clear appearance of the broth reinforces the story. Clear liquid must mean clean right. Except it doesn't. In this case, the clarity isn't a sign of purity, it's a sign of absence. The broth looks light not because it's carefully made, but because there's almost nothing inside it. You see the problem the moment you cook. A holiday soup simmered with this broth tastes strangely empty, even if you load it with good chicken, fresh herbs, and hours of patience. The flavor sits on top of the dish instead of sinking into it. Everything floats. Nothing binds. The salt hits quickly, then leaves just as fast, and what remains is a bowl that somehow tastes both loud and hollow. You keep adjusting more garlic, more thyme, more seasoning, trying to coax depth that never appears. The broth simply doesn't have the body to carry the meal, and that's the most revealing part. Tabachnik's lightness isn't the graceful, subtle kind that comes from careful cooking. It's manufactured lightness, a broth that looks pure but isn't. A broth that promises comfort but arrives without enough substance to hold anything together. If a product wearing the word wholesome can hide this many shortcuts behind a gentle label, then the next broth shows something even trickier: how an organic badge can tell a story that the ingredient list can't live up to. Number 4, imagine organic free-range chicken broth. When a broth carries the word organic on the front, you expect it to feel trustworthy. You expect something closer to tradition, the kind of comfort many of us associate with slow, steady chicken broth. That's the promise. Imagine organic free-range. Chicken broth puts forward the moment you see the carton. It looks gentle, clean, and reassuring, as if what's inside must reflect the care suggested on the outside. Traditional broth has its own language. It's the soft steam rising in slow waves. It's that clouded golden color, never too clear, never too sharp. It's the aroma of chicken easing upward with a hint of onion and carrot trailing behind. And when you sip it, there's weight around mouthfeel born from real bones and hours of patient simmering. The salt stays modest, the sweetness is natural, The warmth settles somewhere low in your chest. That's the broth people remember. That's the broth organic should honor. But the regular salted version from Imagine breaks that expectation almost as soon as you open it. The color leans brighter than it should. The scent rises fast, not chicken, but a sharp vegetal note almost like celery water touched with onion. The body feels thin, almost hollow on the tongue, and instead of slow depth, you get a quick pointed hit of salt. Only after that comes the label around 720 milligrams of sodium per cup, with less than 1 gram of protein. A broth with so little protein hasn't drawn much from chicken bones at all. Salt and aromatics are carrying the entire load, giving height but not depth brightness without grounding. And people feel it. Online reviews call it too salty vegetable water and nothing like real broth. That kind of feedback doesn't come from shock. It comes from disappointment, the sense that a dish is almost right but never fully lands. When a broth adds sharpness instead of comfort, the emotional weight of a meal changes too. You see this in small, everyday dishes. A pot of rice porridge turns faintly vegetal no matter how carefully it's seasoned. Chicken added later doesn't settle into the broth. Everything tastes like separate pieces instead of one warm bowl. The broth lifts the flavors upward but never brings them together. And in one kitchen, the moment spoke louder than any review. A husband tasted the soup, paused, then gave a gentle shake of his head. Not unkind, just honest. His wife stood over the stove, shoulders dropping slightly. She had added the herbs, the vegetables, and the thyme, everything except the depth the broth was supposed to provide. She knew something was missing, and the broth never stepped up to help. Number 5. Swanson Chicken Broth. Swanson is the broth many of us grew up with, but not every childhood staple survives the test of flavor. For decades, that blue carton sat in pantries across America, on high shelves in small kitchens, next to canned vegetables in older homes. For many older cooks, Swanson wasn't just a broth, it was the broth. The one name they didn't have to second guess. But the moment you taste it today, the shift becomes difficult to ignore. The color strikes you first. It leans towards a bright, almost glowing yellow, louder than the gold you'd expect from slow-simmered chicken broth. It's clear, but not in a natural way. It looks engineered, polished, sharpened. Then, as you bring it closer, the salinity rises before anything else. One sip confirms it, the salt steps forward, rapidly taking command before the chicken even touches your palate. And inside that seemingly familiar carton, a single cup holds around 860 milligrams of sodium, a fact that aligns cleanly with its ranking at the bottom of a 14-brand taste test for being overwhelmingly salty and notably thin in chicken flavor. Once the pot begins to simmer, the pattern reveals itself completely. Swanson's regular blue carton broth is built for mass distribution. The goal is to taste the same everywhere in a rural grocery store in the Midwest, in a coastal supermarket, in a chain retailer tucked into a busy city. That kind of consistency demands formulas that do not depend heavily on real variations in chicken bones or long simmer times. Instead, the broth leans heavily on salt and natural flavoring to create the impression of depth where the stock itself provides very little. It's dependable but dependably shallow. And that's where nostalgia meets the present. The flavor no longer carries the slow, steady notes many people remember. Instead, it delivers something sharper, faster, and more one-dimensional, a profile built to withstand mass production rather than evoke homemade comfort. What used to blend gently into a dish now sits loudly on the surface. Online feedback mirrors this experience. Review after review mentions the same themes: too salty, tastes like yellow water, not the Swanson my mom used, feels thinner than it used to be. These reactions aren't angry, they're tired. They read like acknowledgments that a once trusted flavor simply doesn't behave the way memory promises. You see the difference most clearly in simple, honest meals. A chicken and rice pot, the kind that should taste round, calm, and steady, begins well enough. But as the minutes go by, something feels off. The brightness doesn't mellow, it spikes. The chicken notes don't deepen, they fade. Before long, the pot tastes strangely metallic, like the salt has pushed forward so hard that the broth can't find its balance again. You add herbs, you add water, maybe a squeeze of lemon. You try to coax the pot back into harmony, but the broth refuses to settle. It gives you loudness, not warmth. Even in quick recipes, a simple gravy, a vegetable soup, a broth-based noodle bowl, the same pattern appears. Swanson brings intensity but not foundation, height but not body, presence but not depth. The broth lifts flavors upward but never gives them anything solid to rest on. Instead of holding the meal together, it leaves everything slightly disconnected, as if the pot itself is trying to compensate for something missing at the base. For people who grew up with Swanson, this realization lands softly but heavily. The carton still looks the same. The brand still feels the same, but the experience doesn't. The nostalgia stays warm. The memory of those older meals still means something. Yet the broth inside the box no longer rises to meet that memory. Some childhood staples grow with us, others stay behind. Swanson's regular broth tries to bridge the years with color and salt, but the flavor tells a different story, one that doesn't quite reach the comfort it once promised. After walking through these disappointments, it's easy to feel like every broth on the shelf is a compromise waiting to happen. But that's not the full picture. For all the shortcuts and salt-heavy formulas out there, a few brands still take the long road. The slower simmer, the deeper extraction, the kind of honesty you can taste without reading the label twice. These are the broths that don't rely on color or slogans to win you over. They rely on work. And when you finally pour them into a pot, the difference doesn't shout. It settles in steady and real. Number 6, Kettle and Fire Chicken Bone Broth. The first thing you notice is the aroma. Not sharp, not forced, not dressed up with herbs that try to distract you. Just a slow rising warmth, the kind that feels like it's coming from real bones in real time. Kettle and Fire lets that speak before anything else. No loud colors, no promises printed in oversized fonts. Just a broth that feels alive the moment it warms. Across slow hours, more than 20 of them, the bones give up what they're meant to give collagen marrow steady depth. And that's why a single cup carries around 10 grams of protein without relying on flavor enhancers or artificial shortcuts. The broth isn't built around tricks, it's built around patience. Real simmering, real extraction. Real work that you can taste without needing to read a label to confirm it. Once it's poured into the pot, you see it immediately. The color leans toward a cloudy gold, soft and honest. It doesn't glow. It doesn't look laser perfect. It looks like something that came from a kitchen, not a factory line. Beneath the steam, the chicken note rises slowly and evenly, accompanied by a natural fullness that only long simmering can create. Nothing jumps at you, nothing spikes. The flavor builds instead of bursts. And that changes the way the broth behaves in actual cooking. Add it to rice and the grains take on a rounder edge. Add it to vegetables and the sweetness feels deeper. Add it to a simple chicken soup, and the pot starts to settle into itself without any effort on your part. The broth doesn't fight the recipe. It doesn't overwrite the other ingredients. It blends into them, holding everything in place with a backbone that comes from real bones, not sodium. As many home cooks mention online, this is one of the few store-bought broths that doesn't make you adjust your entire pot to compensate. People call it the closest to homemade rich without heaviness, and smooth in a way that feels natural, not engineered. Those aren't dramatic compliments. They're small, steady confirmations that the broth behaves exactly as it should, supportive, generous, balanced. And the relief shows up in small moments. There's a home cook tired after a long day tasting the broth before adding anything else. A short pause, a small nod, the kind of expression that says, "This already tastes right." No scrambling for extra herbs, no need to dilute. No need to chase flavor that should have been there from the start. The broth carries its own weight so the rest of the dish doesn't have to struggle. A broth built this way doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't rely on aggressive salt. It doesn't lean on additives to fill empty spaces. Its depth feels earned because it is earned through time, bones, heat, and care. And when a broth is built on real extraction, it settles into a pot, the same way good foundations settle into a home. Quietly, steadily, and without demanding attention. You finish the pot and notice something simple. Everything tasted like what it was supposed to taste like, just fuller, rounder, more grounded. The broth didn't perform for the dish. It supported it. It doesn't try to dominate the pot, it supports it the way real broth should. Number 7, Pacific Foods Organic Chicken Broth. Pacific Foods began in Oregon with one idea. Real broth should taste like it came from a kitchen, not a factory. Before organic became a selling point, before clean label turned into a marketing trend, the company anchored itself in something simpler. Slow cooking real vegetables and a belief that broth should carry the honesty of the place it was made. Farms, quiet towns, hands-on work. All of that shaped the way Pacific built its recipes. You can still feel that origin when you open the carton. The aroma lifts gently warm and calm without any sharp edge or artificial brightness. The broth itself has a soft, pale golden tone. Not flashy, not heavily polished, but the kind of color you get when onions, carrots, and celery simmer alongside chicken at an easy pace. There's a steadiness to it, a sense that the broth wasn't rushed into existence. The ingredient list carries the same clarity, short, simple, organic. No flavor enhancers, no hidden masking agents, no extra noise. The unsalted version keeps sodium near zero so the cook decides what the dish should be, not the factory. With around 1 gram of protein per cup, its purpose isn't intensity, it's purity. It reminds you of soups made on long afternoons where flavor grows slowly instead of being engineered to arrive all at once. And then there's the price, slightly more than the cheap cartons, well below the luxury broths. It sits in that honest middle space. Not the option you grab because it's the cheapest, not the one you justify as a treat. Just a fair price for ingredients that were given time and care? You get the sense you're paying for real vegetables, real cooking, real sourcing, not shortcuts hidden behind a pretty label. Its achievements reflect that steady commitment. Pacific became one of the first broadly distributed organic broths in the country, long before the market shifted in that direction. Over the years, it built a reputation not through trends, but through consistency, the kind that comes from refusing to change the foundations just because the industry did. When you pour it into a pot, it behaves exactly like something made with intention, gentle, supportive, confident. And that is something you feel most when you cook with it. Add it to rice and the grains warm without turning salty. Pour it over vegetables and their natural sweetness stays intact. Use it as the base for a weekday pot of noodles, and the broth steps back in a way that feels respectful. It lifts the dish instead of steering it. It lets the ingredients breathe. There's a moment that captures this more clearly than any review could. A parent stands over the stove on a long weekday evening, making a simple noodle soup for their kid. The broth simmers softly. They take one small sip just to check, and there's this gentle release in their face. A kind of assurance. The kind that comes from tasting something clean, steady, and free of harsh edges. It's the feeling that the meal will be good, even if life outside the kitchen has been a little heavy. It costs a little more, but it honors the craft and it lets the rest of the meal bloom. Chicken broth seems simple. It sits on the shelf promising comfort in a box, waiting to be poured into whatever meal needs a little warmth. But once you start looking closer, you realize how different those boxes truly are. Some rely on shortcuts, salt additives, and color that try to imitate depth instead of building it. Others take the longer road, letting time bones and real vegetables do the work. And that difference matters more than it seems. Broth is the foundation of so many meals. When the base is weak, the whole dish leans. When the base is honest, everything else stands taller. The good news is you don't need perfection. You just need awareness, a moment to turn the carton around, a moment to choose the kind of work you want supporting your food. Because real comfort doesn't come from convenience, it comes from care.
This video does not promote division within the United States or encourage education. All content is presented for the purpose of exploration, analysis, and fostering discussion based on current events, public sentiment, and social trends. We fully respect the United States Constitution and all federal regulations. If today's analysis made you think, drop a comment so we can keep the conversations going. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you will never miss our next independent deep dive.